Hello everyone, today we're in the stunning and picturesque setting of Aysgarth Falls, a series of cascading waterfalls nestled in the Yorkshire Dales National Park in North Yorkshire, here in England. Known for its breathtaking natural beauty, Aysgarth Falls has been a source of inspiration for artists and poets alike, and has even featured in films such as Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. This idyllic location is the perfect backdrop to dive very deep into this, the Bramier Trilayer GMT Dive Watch, a 3-layer dial watch featuring the premium Miyota 9075 GMT movement, and a watch that launched on Kickstarter on Tuesday the 4th of June 2024. But before we do all that, please do remember to leave me a comment at the end of my vid and hit the subscribe button now. I'd absolutely love to know what your opinions are of this Trilayer GMT dive watch, and in all the future vids that I do. Oh, and don't forget, I do segment every part of my review into chapters, so you can navigate easily through each element. And stick around to the end of my review for my usual walk around, where I take the Bramier Trilayer GMT dive watch on a tour of the serene Aysgarth Falls. Thank you for being here, and let's start with the brand. Bramier is an Italian microbrand formerly known as Bencler, and you may have watched my review of the Bencler rocks diver I did a couple of years ago, back when my channel was in its infancy, and they've decided to go through a rebrand and change their identity to Bramier. And now founded in 2022, Bramier say that their brand was born to create watches for people who seek scrupulous attention to every single detail. Now, I mentioned in the past that they created the rocks diver, and that rocks diver, aside from this in my hand today, forms the only watch within their product range. And it was a really successful Kickstarter campaign, actually reaching over 100 backers, and you'll be hard pressed to find one. They've sold out, and you very rarely see one on the aftermarket, a great sign of a very well designed and well crafted watch. This, the Bramier Rocks Trilayer GMT dive watch, is their second design, and in my hands today is the teal, but other colourways will be available. The blue, sap green, and this, the teal. And now, I don't normally say this, but I would have perhaps liked to have had one or two more colourways to choose from, as the range does feel somewhat limiting in the respect of colour. Perhaps a red and a black to complement the Rocks Diver colourway set, even if it was just a stretch goal on their Kickstarter campaign. I don't know, just a personal preference of mine that I thought I'd share. So just to reiterate what was said in the opening 90-second spec, this, the Trilayer prototype, comes in at 12.9mm thick, though they are reducing this to 12.5mm for final production, 42mm in diameter, 49mm lug to lug, with this bracelet 22mm at the lug and tapering down to around about 18mm by the time it reaches the branded butterfly clasp. And just to note that they will also be changing that clasp to something more like this, which I think looks so much better. Now, the dial is where the Trilayer GMT truly shines, and the 3-layer dial is a brilliant interpretation of time in my opinion, featuring 3 distinct layers that provide unique visual depth and a very different way of showcasing functionality. The first of the 3 layers forms the foundation of the dial, and it houses the inner bezel, but it also provides a base for the rest of the layers, not least this. In the centre, the second of the 3 layers. You have a GMT disc here in the middle, which forms the focal point of the overall design of this watch, and this disc replaces the traditional GMT hand and provides what Bramier say is a clear and intuitive display of the GMT time, allowing for easier reading of different time zones. And I kind of agree. That GMT disc is smooth and showcases a soft arrowhead representing the GMT marker, and well, I know that at first glance this Trilayer dial looks fairly complex, but I would have loved to have seen that beautiful texture that was really iconic on their Rocks Diver to be present on this GMT watch. Not least because I think it really could have formed part of their brand identity by utilising that texture in all their designs. But then my head says that perhaps by keeping this disc very clean also adds to a better clarity on the overall dial. Surrounding that GMT is an inner bezel that houses 24-hour GMT markings, which also sports the logo. Now, the 3rd layer outside that central GMT function is where you have applied indices in white on that layer of concentric circles, and those circles really do add a lot of texture to the overall feel of the style. The hour markers are pretty bold, numerals at the 12, 3, 6 and 9, with large battens covering the rest. Also note that on the dial you have the date complication with the date sitting pretty deep, so you do get an idea of the thickness of this particular layer. So in certain angles you may not get 100% visibility on that date complication, though final production models will, according to Bramier, sport date position reformulation. You have the minute markers on the chapter ring that surrounds this entire dial, and whilst it does at a glance add a varying tone of teal to this dial, it is rather difficult to see and isn't prominent whatsoever, but perhaps that's just me being picky once again. The hands are these skeletoned alpha hands, skeletonized so you can obviously see the second time zone on the GMT dial, in both polished steel. Now notice the absence of any other steel on the rest of the dial, so there isn't a great deal of polish on the face of this watch. Perhaps the addition of polished steel outlines on the numerals and baton hour markers may have touched this up a fraction. I don't know, just a thought. The hands are quite thin in my opinion, which probably doesn't complement the big bold indices and the fact that this is a 42mm very well, but I have been told that final production models will sport a slightly thicker base of those hands, so it might add to the boldness of those hands. You have a squared lollipop needle seconds hand, the tip of which sweeps over the chapter ring and its respective minute markers. The watch features a sapphire crystal with an anti-reflective coating, and it performed pretty well during my visit to the stunning Aysgarth Falls. Now despite the bright day, the AR coating on the sapphire held up impressively, providing clear visibility throughout. Now these falls are set against a very lush green landscape, and I think the Trilayer GMT dive watch actually looked pretty mint against that backdrop. Now back to the watch, and this bezel showcases a two-tone design that transitions from darker to lighter shades, providing the perfect contrast for quickly and accurately distinguishing between day and night, and I actually really like that two-tone. It sports a bidirectional 120 click bezel which offers a fairly smooth rotation and precise clicks at every position, and it's also worth noting that the bezel insert is also crafted from sapphire for enhanced scratch resistance, and is also filled with luminescence, which I'll come to in a sec, ensuring improved visibility in low light conditions. Now this is marketed as a GMT dive watch, but there isn't really much functionality to classify this as a dive watch in the absence of a countdown timer on the bezel, with Bramier opting for a GMT bezel to give this watch the functionality to read up to 3 time zones, as opposed to a bezel with a diver's countdown and the ability to read to 2 time zones. So if you're a frequent traveller with this watch, then great, but if you're travelling to a different time zone to go diving, I'd recommend packing a separate dive watch. Speaking of Lume, you'll find that this watch is lit up with Swiss Super Luminova BGW9 on the inner bezel, hands and bezel, which looks pretty cool in my opinion. Now there's not much else I can say about this Lume, so let's just take a minute to let it speak for itself. The case of the Bramier Trilayer GMT dive watch is constructed from 316L stainless steel, offering decent durability, and it is satin finished. It's fairly thick, with this case measuring 12.9mm including the bezel and sapphire. Now Bramier say that they will be decreasing the height of the case a touch for final production. It's satin finished, emphasising smoothness all the way around the case, fairly straightforward with polished chamfers spanning each lug from the bezel right down to the end of the lug, and that polished chamfer adds a bit of sleekness to the case and complements the hands in particular fairly well in my opinion. Now it's a nicely rounded case actually, absent from sharp edges and sharp tones, complementing the very round feel of this watch, not least the concentric circles found on that third layer of the dial. You can notice here that the crown sits fairly low, and that's because the movement is actually sat fairly low in comparison to the height of the case, bearing in mind that above the movement you need to house 3 layers of dial. Now it is a screw down crown and has 3 operations. The outer function controlling both the time and the GMT disc, and you'll notice hacking seconds too. The second function controlling the hour hand, and actually it's here where you also control the date complication. So yes, moving the date forward requires you to go through the entire day, but note that you can go forward and back when setting the date, though there's something inside of me that feels slightly uncomfortable with moving this date complication backwards. Don't know why. And the third position is where you can obviously wind the watch. This does feature a screw down crown contributing to its water resistance rating of 200 meters, that's 20 ATM, which makes it suitable for recreational diving, swimming and snorkeling. The crown is also signed with the Bramier logo, a nice touch that enhances the watch's overall aesthetic. The bracelet is made from 316L stainless steel, matching the case for a cohesive look. It sports H-links and is balanced between satin and polished steel, the H-links being in satin to complement the finish of the case. Now this does sport a butterfly clasp, which may raise a few eyebrows, but I actually kind of like it more for its aesthetic appeal over functionality. I mean, it's an H-link bracelet with butterfly clasp on a GMT dive watch, so probably not what you'd be expecting, and probably further reinforcing my recommendation that you don't use this as a dive watch in the absence of any sort of micro adjustment. It's also worth noting now that Bramier are changing the logo placement on the clasp to feature their name as well as the logo, which I think is a really good move. Functionality aside, I actually really like the bracelet personally, and I like the two-tone between the satin and the polished, which really glams up this watch. The temptation might have been for this to sport an oyster style bracelet or Jubilee, but I actually like that they've gone down this route. Now Italian-made Saffiano straps, hand-stitched, will also be available to purchase at €59. It's around about 50 quid or 65 USD, and those straps are really very high quality and will give you the option to take it off the steel and move onto a more casual strap, but at additional cost. At the heart of the Trilayer GMT dive watch is the Miyota 9075 automatic movement, known for its reliability and precision. Now this movement showcases 28,800 beats per hour, 24 joules, 42 hours of power reserve, and as you've seen, hacking seconds, hand winding in addition to automatic and individual hour hand movement. This is a true GMT, and it makes for a very easy changing over the current time when you cross into different time zones. And that movement sits behind this lovely exhibition caseback. This proto contains old Bencler branding, which will obviously be changed when final production models are manufactured. And you can see a branded rotor, which looks pretty cool. And this caseback also sports sapphire crystal. So it's a hat trick of sapphire on this watch. The crystal above the dial, the bezel, and this, the caseback. On my 7.5-inch wrist it wears, well, what can I say, it wears pretty good. It's a big bold watch, 42mm across, which is forgiven slightly by the big bold bezel, and that fairly complex dial lessens the look of too much dial on your wrist. And what I mean by that is if, say for example, this had a very plain dial, same dimensions, it would give it the illusion of being much bigger. Now it sits quite high too. I mean, this is near 13mm in height, but as I've mentioned, Bramier will be reducing it a touch. Female end links give you a much better drop of this bracelet around your wrist, and it reduces bulk slightly given that this is a 49mm lug to lug. Now I actually really like the way it looks. I think it's rather stylish, and that really boils down to the complex and attractive dial, but also I really like this bracelet. Now I know it's probably unconventional for a GMT dive watch to sport this bracelet, but I really like it for its stylish look. I mean, how many really go for functionality over style? I personally go for style. Now, when I wore this around the beautiful Aysgarth Falls, I wore, lo and behold, grayscale Nike Air Force Ones, shorts and a tee, and it really was a stunning day here in North Yorkshire. And this was a lovely fit and it felt great on my wrist. As of today, 8th of June 2024, the Bramier Trilayer GMT dive watch is available on Kickstarter with a super early bird pricing set at a very competitive €459. That's around $499 USD, £391 pounds sterling, but you may have missed the boat on that by now, as at the time of saying this, there was literally only a few super early bird slots available. If you have missed that boat, then the early bird rate of €479, that's around about $520 USD or £408 pounds sterling, will be available thereafter. Now either price for me represents decent value for a true GMT sporting a Miyota 9075, fairly decent spec elsewhere, and well, it being a Microbrand too always does it for me. Now the campaign kicked off on the 4th of June 2024 and the round of funding ends on the 19th of June 2024, with production starting in July 2024 and ending in September 2024. Quality control follows in October 2024, with shipping to all backers happening in November 2024. Overall, the Bramier Trilayer GMT watch, and with the changes that are forecasted to be made for final production, I think will be an exceptional timepiece that, for me, combines style with a great GMT functionality, if not dive watch functionality. It's GMT disc that forms the central focal point of this quite good looking dial design, coupled with the attractive two-tone bezel, makes this a great choice for those who appreciate a handsome but also well crafted and, dare I say, quite quirky GMT watch. I really like it. The innovative dial design with its distinct layers and central GMT disc here creates a visually striking, easy to read display. Coupled with the attractive two-tone bezel, this timepiece offers a unique blend of elegance and practicability, making it an ideal choice for those who, like I say, appreciate a well-crafted true GMT watch. So whether you're exploring the serene beauty of Aysgarth Falls or navigating different time zones, the Trilayer GMT for me is a reliable and stylish companion.
You have an infinite food source.